Hello and welcome to Scrapbooking Station. In this quick card video, I'll take you step by step through this Christmas tree card design in my chosen Christmas colors and with an embossing folder. And as always, have several different samples, so hopefully we can hit something that's in your stash. So I'm going to put the camera over my shoulder and we'll get started. To begin with, let me just describe the materials that I'm going to use for this card. So I've got a card base and it actually is textured. It's an off-white ivory. I've got a back panel, and I'll talk more about that later. I've got a pop of bright red, and this is a specialty cardstock. It's holographic bright red. This is just going to edge my focal. And then my focal is going to be a piece of marigold. Let me just bring in a piece of that. So it's marigold, and what's going to make it pop is that it is going to be dry embossed. Now the scale of your card is going to depend on this embossing folder, or more specifically the image of your embossing folder. I like to cut it to the size that I want to go on the front of my card before dry embossing, and this way I don't have to worry about trimming it off later. So positioning it exactly, let me just pull this out because I've already dry embossed it, and that is just a really pretty start. Okay. Once I have this, because I know what size this is, my specialty material is only going to be 1/8 of an inch on each side, which means I want this mat to be 1/4 inch larger. From there, I know I want to fit it into the top portion of my card. Now my paper happens to already have the pattern that I want for my card front, or my backing paper. And so I trimmed it 1/8 short, which gives me 1/16 of an inch on all sides. It is longer than the base because what I'm going to do is I'm going to split it here and I'm going to split it here. So I'm actually going to have, and what you could use, are 3 different papers, or 2 papers and a ribbon. Of course, I'm going to need some of this stuff for the inside, and so before I start putting things onto my card, let me bring in these. I am going to gut. So I'm going to cut a piece out of here, and of course I'm going to cut a piece out of my specialty as well. Okay, I'm going to prepare the elements. We're going to start assembling. I've divided up that back panel, and so like I said, this could have been 3 papers. As it happens, I had a border that has a sentiment also. And I backed the sentiment using that same specialty paper that I'm backing my focal on. Now before I position this, I first want to bring this piece in, and I do apologize, my camera has got throws a fit with all these specialty papers. But I'm going to position it kind of towards the top, make sure I'm even on both sides, and put this down first. And this way I have plenty of room here to play, kind of even up those 2 empty areas and raise that up. So I can get that on my card front. And then the last thing I want to do is go ahead and do something special with this tree. So I've got some red and gold stickers that I'm going to position on some of these circles. I've also got a Sharpie marker that I'm going to use to color in some of these stars very carefully, because while it's raised, it's not raised up that high, and I don't want to booger up the backing of this Christmas tree. I do test it, so I made sure I've got that on there, and if you let it dry, it will dry so that it doesn't come off. And that will finish up the front of my card, so I'll be back with that piece. So in the finished card, the only thing I've added is some actually kind of slick satin red ribbon to kind of go with this bright red. So where do these things come from? Well, first off, this embossing folder is from a box collection from Hunky Dory. It's the Christmas box. So I've got that, but I thought of, this is actually a little bit wider tree, but in this card, and actually my finished card ended up to be 4.5 by 8 inches. So when it's closed. And what I was going to say is this one's a little bit wider, but it would fit. This comes from Paper Wishes. So it's another tree. And then I thought, well, really any shaped image, Christmas image, would work. This is a wreath, an older one from Stampin' Up. And then actually for a Christmas tree, all you've got is a triangle with a trunk. You know what? I would cut out a triangle with a trunk, back it on the same specialty paper, and use it all over embossing folder. So this is a swirl. Okay, the only other thing I added was a gem, and of course using my Sharpie marker on a clear rhinestone from Stampin' Up. So that's the outside. Turned out really nice. And then the inside, I shared that photograph because I found that when you have a cluster of elements, whether it's on the front of your card, the inside of your card, or a scrapbook page, it's actually easier to put it together on some sort of grid. And this way you make sure everything is really square. So I'm going to leave you photos of this along with the second piece, because the second piece, this is kind of in your face. So let's bring this one in. I used a different textured specialty paper. This is kind of a linen gold. Exactly the same thing. So exactly the same backing paper. A different ribbon because this one isn't quite so shiny and not quite so in your face. And on craft cardstock. So the interior again is kind of doing the same thing. Remembering that those are the guts of my panels on the front. So not wasting anything. Of course, a pair of envelopes. So before leaving the embossing folders, I wanted to do one in a different color scheme. So this is purple, and this is using some Kanban foiled cardstock and some Paper Wishes gold holographic back behind there. So my three colors are actually specialty purple, gold, and then a plain purple. Now I misspoke. Those other cards were 4.5 by 7.5 finished. This one is a true double length, so this is 4 by 8. And so in this case, I just decreased kind of those side pieces a little bit. On the inside, and what I'm using here is a tree punch. This is an oldie but goodie, but again, this tree is simply a triangle with a rectangle base. So I would piece that together for sure. And then I've got some dies here from China. Merry Christmas, Happy New Year. So again, gutting the front and using that on my interior. Okay, now I want to switch to not an embossing folder. So I've got a stencil because they make these things. Christmas tree is pretty popular, or these triangular Christmas trees are pretty popular. Let me put my hand behind it. So that's what I've got. Obviously, this is going to be a bit larger. And so what I've got here is a 5 by 8 finished card. And so all I did was use some Ranger embossing paste. So it is the metallic gold from Dreamweaver. Oh, not Ranger, Dreamweaver embossing paste. And then some cutting dies. This also came from that box collection. So there were some snowflakes with the snow globe. And this time using behind here, what I've got is kind of a red. It's almost coral colored glitter cardstock. So something that shines back up at you. Some glitter ribbon here. But again, the same backing paper. So a little bit wider, different materials, but still really pretty. And the inside, simply Happy Holidays again. And this is using a Toto hot foil machine. So basically your sentiment. Of course, I don't like to repeat sentiments. So Merry Christmas here and Happy Holidays on the inside. Again, using the guts on the interior of my card. I have got one last card to show you. Oh, that's the envelope for that piece. And that is, okay, you don't have a embossing folder and you don't have a stencil. What about a stamp? Christmas tree I used was special season. Of course, I knew when I gold embossed it, I was going to lose a lot of the details. Actually, lost all the details. But my process for doing that is because I want to keep these separate. I used to keep my combo kind of powders and glitters together, but then I would never reuse them. So, stamp with Versamark, and then put on my gold embossing powder, clear that away, so tap it off. And then lastly, go ahead and add, this is champagne glass. So basically chunky glitter. Kind of sprinkled it on where I wanted to. The other thing I've added is some Nuvo drops. So instead of using Dazzles and a Sharpie marker, this time I've got Nuvo drops in red and gold. And this paper is a red ripple paper from Paper Wishes. And a grosgrain ribbon. On the inside, since I'm stamping on the front, of course I like to be somewhat consistent, so I stamped on the inside and added some of those snowflakes left over from the other card. Anyway, I think that is all I've got to show you. So, whether you've got a stamp or a stencil or an embossing folder, I hope you took something away with you you can use in your own card making, and I thank you for watching.